So they pushed her down the stairs, but didn't know she was trained by the military. Maya Rodriguez had always been different, though most people at Riverside High couldn't pinpoint exactly why. At 17, she was shorter than average, with a stocky build that made her gym clothes hang awkwardly on her frame. Her dark hair was always pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she wore the same 3 faded hoodies in rotation. But it wasn't just her appearance that made her stand out, it was her silence. While other students filled the hallways with chatter and laughter, Maya moved through Riverside High like a ghost. She kept her head down, spoke only when spoken to, and had perfected the art of becoming invisible. Most assumed she was just another shy immigrant kid, trying not to draw attention. They had no idea that her quietness came from years of military discipline drilled into her by her father, Sergeant Major Carlos Rodriguez, before his deployment overseas. Keep your head down, observe everything, and never reveal your capabilities, unless absolutely necessary. Her father's words echoed in her mind every morning as she walked through the school's main entrance. The irony wasn't lost on her. She could probably take down half the football team without breaking a sweat, yet she spent her days avoiding confrontation at all costs. Riverside High was typical of most suburban schools, long corridors lined with lockers, a cafeteria that smelled perpetually of reheated pizza, and students who had formed their social hierarchies years ago. Maya had transferred here 6 months ago when her mother got a job at the local hospital, and she still felt like an outsider looking in. The problem started small, as these things usually do. It began with Jake Morrison, a senior who stood 6 feet tall and had the kind of confident swagger that came from being the star quarterback. His sandy brown hair was always perfectly styled, and his Letterman jacket seemed permanently attached to his shoulders. Next to him stood his constant companions, Tyler Brooks, a linebacker whose neck was thicker than most people's thighs, and Ashley Williams, whose perfectly manicured nails were as sharp as her tongue. "Watch where you're going, Rodriguez," Jake had said the first time Maya accidentally bumped into him in the hallway. She had mumbled an apology and hurried away, not noticing the calculating look in his eyes. That look said he had found his next target. The incidents escalated gradually. First, it was accidental shoulder checks in the hallway that sent Maya's book scattering across the floor. Then came the whispered comments about her clothes, her accent, her mother's job at the hospital. Ashley took particular pleasure in making loud observations about Maya's appearance whenever she passed their table in the cafeteria. "Doesn't she own anything that actually fits?" Ashley would say, not bothering to lower her voice. "I mean, shopping at Goodwill is one thing, but this is just sad." Maya endured it all in silence, her jaw clenched but her expression neutral. Do not engage. Do not escalate. Blend in and survive. The mantras her father had taught her kept her grounded, even as her fists ached to connect with Ashley's smug face. The worst part wasn't the bullying itself, it was the way everyone else just watched. Teachers looked the other way when Jake's crew cornered her by her locker. Other students pretended not to hear Ashley's cutting remarks. Even the ones who seemed sympathetic never spoke up, afraid of becoming targets themselves. This is what cowardice looks like, Maya thought, as she watched yet another classmate avert their eyes when Jake knocked her water bottle out of her, hands in the hallway. The water splashed across her homework, and she had to bite her tongue to keep from saying something that would make things worse. Mrs. Patterson, her English teacher, was the only adult who seemed to notice something was wrong. She had kept Maya after class one day, her grey hair pulled back in a neat bun and concern written across her weathered face. "Maya, is everything all right? You seem withdrawn lately." Maya had forced a smile and shrugged. "I'm fine, Mrs. Patterson, just focusing on my studies." But she wasn't fine. Every day brought new humiliations, and every night she went home with her father's voice in her head, reminding her to stay disciplined, stay focused, and never let her emotions control her actions. The problem was, her emotions were getting harder to control. The breaking point came on a Tuesday in March. Maya was walking up the main staircase between classes, her backpack heavy with textbooks, when she felt a sudden shove from behind. The world tilted, and she found herself tumbling down 12 concrete steps, her books exploding around her like shrapnel. She hit the landing hard, her shoulder taking the brunt of the impact before her head cracked against the wall. Stars exploded behind her eyes, and for a moment she couldn't tell which way was up. When her vision cleared, she saw Jake standing at the top of the stairs with Tyler and Ashley, all 3 of them laughing. "Oops," Jake called down, his voice dripping with false concern. "You should really watch where you're going, Rodriguez. These stairs can be dangerous." A crowd had gathered, phones already out and recording. Maya could hear the whispers, the stifled laughter, the complete lack of concern for whether she was actually hurt. Blood trickled from a cut on her forehead, and her shoulder throbbed with each heartbeat. "Get up," she told herself. "Get up and walk away. Don't give them the satisfaction." But as she struggled to her feet, gathering her scattered belongings while the crowd dispersed like she was nothing more than a temporary entertainment, something inside her snapped. Not her discipline, that remained intact. Not her control. She was still perfectly aware of every muscle in her body, every breath, every heartbeat. What snapped was her willingness to be invisible. That night, Maya stared at herself in her bedroom mirror, taking inventory of the damage. The cut on her forehead would heal, and the bruises on her shoulder were already turning purple. But something else had changed. Her eyes looked different, harder, more focused. She opened her closet and pushed aside the hoodies and oversized shirts until she found what she was looking for, a small wooden box her father had given her before his deployment. Inside were her dog tags, a few photos, and a letter he had written but told her not to open unless she really needed it. Tonight, she needed it. Maya. The letter began in her father's precise handwriting. "If you're reading this, it means you've reached a point where you need to remember who you are. You are not just my daughter. You are a Rodriguez. We do not bow to bullies. We do not accept defeat. And we never, ever let anyone push us around without consequences. But remember this above all. Strength without restraint is brutality. Control without compassion is tyranny. Be strong but be just. Be fierce but be fair. Show them who you are, but don't become someone you'll regret being." Maya folded the letter carefully and returned it to the box. Then she went to her closet and pulled out clothes she hadn't worn since the transfer. Dark jeans that actually fit, a fitted black t-shirt, and combat boots her father had bought her for her 16th birthday. The next morning, Maya Rodriguez walked into Riverside High a different person. The change was subtle but unmistakable. Her posture was straighter, her stride more confident. She had pulled her hair back in a tight bun instead of her usual ponytail, and the fitted clothes revealed a physique that had been hidden for months under baggy fabric. Students who had barely noticed her before found their eyes following her down the hallway. Jake noticed too. He was standing by his locker with Tyler when Maya walked past, and she caught the way his eyes narrowed as he took in her transformation. "Well, well," he called after her. "Look who decided to dress up. Special occasion, Rodriguez?" Maya stopped, walking. For the first time in 6 months, she turned around and looked Jake Morrison directly in the eyes. The hallway seemed to quiet around them, as if everyone sensed that something had shifted. "Every day's special when you're not afraid of pathetic bullies," she said, her voice carrying clearly down the corridor. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Jake's face flushed red and Tyler stepped forward, cracking his knuckles. "What did you just say?" Jake demanded, his voice rising. Maya smiled, and it wasn't a nice smile. "I said what I said. Maybe you should work on your hearing instead of your aim." The crowd that had gathered gasped. Someone whispered, "Did she just—" But Maya was already walking away, leaving Jake and his crew staring after her in shock. The rest of the morning passed in a strange tension. Word had spread quickly about Maya's confrontation with Jake, and she could feel eyes on her wherever she went. Some students looked at her with newfound respect, others with concern, and a few with the eager anticipation of people who sensed a fight brewing. Ashley cornered her in the bathroom during lunch, her perfect makeup unable to hide the spite. In her eyes, "You think you're tough now?" she hissed, blocking Maya's path to the door. "You think changing your outfit makes you special? You're still the same pathetic little immigrant girl who doesn't belong here." Maya studied Ashley for a moment, taking in the way she stood, the way she held her shoulders, the nervous energy that suggested she was more scared than angry. "You're right," Maya said quietly. "I am the same person. The only difference is, I'm done pretending to be weak to make you feel strong." Before Ashley could respond, Maya stepped around her and walked out, leaving the mean girl sputtering in confusion. The real confrontation came after school. Maya was walking to the bus stop when she heard footsteps behind her. She didn't need to turn around to know who it was. Jake's cologne was expensive and distinctive, and Tyler's heavy breathing was unmistakable. "Hey, Rodriguez," Jake's voice was tight with anger. "We need to talk." Maya stopped walking but didn't turn around. Around them, other students had noticed the confrontation brewing and were forming a loose circle, phones already out and ready. "Nothing to weigh. Talk about Morrison?" "Oh, I think there is." Jake's voice was getting closer. "See, you embarrassed me today, made me look bad in front of everyone. That's not something I can let slide." Maya finally turned around. Jake was standing less than 3 feet away, with Tyler on his right and Ashley slightly behind them. Their faces were flushed with anger and embarrassment, and she could see they had worked themselves up to this moment. "You embarrassed yourself," Maya said calmly. "I just pointed it out." "You little—" Jake lunged forward, his hand reaching for Maya's shoulder. He never made contact. Maya's reaction was instinctive and devastating. Years of training with her father, hours spent learning to defend herself and others, muscle memory that had been dormant for months. All of it came flooding back in an instant. She sidestepped Jake's clumsy grab, grabbed his extended wrist, and used his own momentum to send him stumbling past her. Before he could recover, she pivoted and drove her elbow into his solar plexus, doubling him over and leaving him gasping for air. Tyler, shocked by the speed of Maya's response, swung a wild haymaker that would have connected with most opponents. But Maya wasn't most opponents. She ducked under his punch, stepped inside his guard, and delivered a quick combination to his ribs that dropped him to one knee. The entire confrontation had lasted less than 10 seconds. Ashley screamed, but it was too late. Maya had already stepped back, her hands at her sides, her breathing steady and controlled. She looked down at Jake, who was still struggling to catch his breath. "Stay down," she said quietly. "Both of you." But Jake Morrison had never backed down from anything in his life, and humiliation was a powerful motivator. With a roar of rage, he pushed himself to his feet and charged at Maya with everything he had. This time, Maya didn't hold back. She caught Jake's wild swing, twisted his arm behind his back, and swept his legs out from under him in one fluid motion. He hit the pavement hard, and before he could move, Maya had him in a perfect chokehold, not enough to seriously hurt him, but enough to make her point crystal clear. "I could have done this 6 months ago," she whispered in his ear, her voice deadly calm. "I could have put you in the hospital the first time you pushed me. Do you know why I didn't?" Jake struggled against her grip, but Maya's hold was unbreakable. "Because I'm not like you," she continued. "I don't hurt people for fun. I don't pick on people weaker than me, and I don't need to make others feel small to feel big about myself." She released him and stepped back. Jake scrambled to his feet, his face red with embarrassment and rage, but something in Maya's eyes stopped him from attacking again. "This is over," Maya announced, her voice carrying to every student in the circle. "You leave me alone, you leave everyone else alone, and we never have to do this again. But if you try to push me, or anyone else, around again, I promise you, this will look like a warm-up." The crowd was silent, phones still recording, everyone waiting to see what would happen next. Tyler was back on his feet but keeping his distance, and Ashley looked like she wanted to disappear entirely. Jake stared at Maya for a long moment, and she could see the calculation in his eyes. He was weighing his options, trying to figure out how to save face, how to maintain his reputation as the tough guy who didn't back down from anyone. Finally, he nodded slowly. "This isn't over, Rodriguez." "Yeah," Maya said quietly. "It is." Jake and his crew walked away, the crowd gradually dispersing as the excitement died down. Maya picked up her backpack and continued toward the bus stop, her heart still pounding but her expression calm. Mrs. Patterson was waiting by the bus when Maya arrived, her face creased with concern. "Maya, are you all right? I heard there was some kind of altercation." Maya managed a small smile. "I'm fine, Mrs. Patterson. Everything's fine now." The next few days at Riverside High were different in ways both subtle and profound. Jake Morrison still walked the halls, with his Letterman jacket and his swagger, but there was something diminished about him. He no longer made eye contact with Maya when they passed in the hallway, and his crew of followers seemed less eager to participate in his usual antics. More importantly, Maya noticed other changes. Students who had never spoken to her before nodded respectfully when they saw her. Freshmen who had been targets of Jake's crew seemed to walk a little taller, and gradually other students began to find their voices too. It started small, someone telling Ashley to keep her nasty comments to herself, another student helping pick up books that had been knocked down, but it grew into something bigger, a shift in the school's culture that said bullying wouldn't be tolerated. Not anymore. Maya still kept to herself, but it was different now. Before, her solitude had been born of fear and the desire to remain invisible. Now, it was a choice. She had proven she could handle herself, and more importantly, she had proven she wouldn't abuse that ability. 2 weeks after the confrontation, Jake Morrison approached her at her locker. He looked different, smaller somehow, less sure of himself. "Rodriguez," he said quietly, glancing around to make sure no one was listening. Can we talk?" Maya studied his face, looking for signs of deception or anger. What she saw instead was something she hadn't expected, genuine remorse. "What do you want, Morrison?" Jake ran a hand through his hair, a gesture that made him look younger and more vulnerable. I wanted to apologize for everything, for pushing you, for the stairs, for all of it. Maya waited, saying nothing. I know this sounds stupid, Jake continued, but I never really thought about what I was doing. I mean, I knew it was mean, but I didn't think about how it actually affected you. Seeing you fight back, seeing how strong you actually are, it made me realize I was just being a coward. You were, Maya agreed, but recognizing it is a start. Jake nodded. I know I can't take back what I did, but I want you to know it won't happen again. And if anyone else tries to mess with you, they'll have to go through me first. Maya almost smiled at that. I can take care of myself. Yeah, Jake said, touching his ribs where she had hit him. I figured that out. They stood there for a moment in awkward silence before Jake spoke again. How did you learn to fight like that? My father, Maya said simply. He taught me that strength is only valuable if you use it to protect people, not hurt them. Jake nodded slowly. Sounds like a smart man. He is. After Jake walked away, Maya reflected on how much had changed in just a few weeks. She was still the same person, still quiet, still observant, still more comfortable in her own company than in a crowd. But she was no longer afraid, and more importantly, she was no longer willing to let others be afraid either. Her father called that night, his voice crackling through the long-distance connection from overseas. I heard you had some excitement at school, he said, and Maya could hear the pride in his voice. How did you? Your mother told me. She said you handled yourself well. Maya smiled. I remembered what you taught me. All of it? All of it. Especially the part about not becoming the thing you fight against. Good girl. That's the most important lesson of all. As Maya hung up the phone, she thought about the letter her father had written, about strength and restraint, about being fierce but fair. She had learned those lessons well, but she had also learned something her father hadn't taught her. Sometimes, the greatest victory isn't in defeating your enemies, but in helping them become better people. Riverside High was still the same school with the same long corridors and the same smell of reheated pizza in the cafeteria. But the atmosphere was different now. Students walked with more confidence, knowing that bullies could be stopped. Teachers paid more attention, having seen what happened when they didn't. And Maya Rodriguez, the quiet girl who had once tried so hard to be invisible, had become exactly what her father had always known she could be, a protector, a leader, and proof that true strength comes not from the ability to hurt others, but from the wisdom to know when that ability should be used.